Let's get into it here. Going to start with the NFC. We'll go in seed order from 1 through 7. Then we'll flip it over to the AFC. Number 1 seed in the NFC will be the Detroit Lions. This game on Sunday night, Evan, was billed as the game of the year. Did not really live up to it. Lions absolutely rolled the Vikings 31-9 to clinch the NFC's top seed, and seemingly, at least, a big step for their beleaguered defense. On offense, Jahmyr Gibbs turns 28 touches into 170 total yards and 4 touchdowns here. Evan, what did you think of Lions' game against the Vikings on Sunday night?
Well, there's no question that down the stretch in the second half, Jahmyr Gibbs just absolutely took this one over against the best run defense in the league, beat up on them from both a rushing and a receiving standpoint. But to me, the biggest story was the Lions' defense, because they went into this game allowing almost 33 points a game over their previous 4, and they generated pressure on almost 60% of Sam Darnold's dropbacks. They stuck Amik Robertson on Justin Jefferson. Amik Robertson won that matchup. The Lions, they went balls to the wall. They played man coverage against the Vikings and won, and that was tough to foresee. I mean, with all their injury depletion. But to me, that was the big story. And now you see Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, getting all kinds of head coaching traction. I think that he will be a head coach in 2025. But my hat goes off to that defense. Amik Robertson got a game ball after the game. I also think that this is a game where really switched some of my opinions. I went into week 18 with Kevin O'Connell as my coach of the year, Sam Darnold as like a top 5 MVP candidate, and I'm totally off of that. And I think that in such a momentous game, with the way that these guys performed in that momentous game, I think it's okay to switch. I think Dan Campbell is the coach of the year, and I would not have Sam Darnold in my top 5 MVP. I would have Jared Goff ahead of him at this point, even though Jared Goff wasn't even that great in this game.
Yeah, okay, so I'll say 2 things on the defense. First, Darnold was terrible. I mean, we'll get to Minnesota in a second here, but with all due respect to the Lions defense, which certainly played way above their heads or way above expectation here, Darnold missed some relatively easy throws for him that would have been touchdowns to Justin Jefferson and others. I mean, he was flat bad, and we'll get to that when we get to Minnesota. Second, Lions did lose Terrion Arnold midway through this game to a foot injury. Looked like it was bad. Turns out it's just day to day. So with the bye, sounds like Terrion Arnold will be back for the Lions' first playoff game. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Lions defense is great now. They did get Anzalone back, which I don't know how much you think that matters, Evan, but he had been out since week 11, and this was his first game back. And it seemed like he at least gave them a spark. So I'm not going to sit here and say there's some great defense. I still think they're a bad defense, but maybe they're not the worst ever heading into the playoffs now.
I think that blitzing at such a high percentage and playing man coverage was a very volatile approach, and they got the peak performance from that volatile approach. They got the I don't know what would the poker term be? They got the best possible result that they possibly could, because I think that they played it very risky, and they wound up winning with that risky approach.
Breaking news into the show. David Montgomery, Dan Campbell announces David Montgomery is expected to be available for the divisional round. So they've already said a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is ahead of time, they do expect to have David Montgomery back for divisional round from his MCL injury. Now, Craig Reynolds got 8 carries here, right? And if you want to say, that's fine, David Montgomery can come in and get Craig Reynolds 8 carries, I think that's the best way to play it. I do not think going back to an even timeshare between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is what I would do in the playoffs. Over the course of a whole season, over the course of regular season, yeah, you don't want to kill Jahmyr Gibbs by giving him 28 touches a game. But in these 3 games that the Lions need to win the Super Bowl, I would have it 70-30 Gibbs ahead of Montgomery. Evan, what do you think about David Montgomery's potential return here for the playoffs?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And they do have until, January 18th or 19th to decide. So they've got still over a week and a half from when we're doing this show, which is Tuesday, January 7th. So they've got time. But I'm with you. The things that David Montgomery bring, really good in short yardage, really good in pass protection. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs brings a lot more big play ability. I mean, he was shot out of a cannon on several of his runs against the Vikings. Again, that's the best run defense in the league. I think I would probably go like 65-35 in favor of Jahmyr Gibbs personally. We'll see what they do. Again, they have 12 days.
Okay, last note I had on the Lions is the Jamison Williams target stuff. Leads the team in targets here on a 7.3 yard ADOT. The week before, Jamison Williams' ADOT average depth of target was 3.8 yards. So they're getting him the ball on these kind of screens behind the line of scrimmage, let him run, and they also give him some of these bombs, of course. But yeah, I mean, Jamison Williams now has 7 or more targets in 6 of his last 7 games. So it's no longer like this huge concern on a week-to-week basis. Is he going to get the targets? He is a big part of the plan, and I just wanted to note that for playoff and playoff best ball stuff, J-Mo has gotten way more targets over the last 5 or 6 weeks. All right. Let's go to the 2 seed in the NFC. It is the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles did not play starters on Sunday as they were locked into that 2 seed. Still beat the Giants 20-13. I don't want to waste too much time on this game against the Giants, but 2 things stuck out to me. First, Tanner McKee has been excellent in his 2 chances. Week 17, relief of Kenny Pickett, and then week 18, playing with stone backups against the Giants starters. I mean, McKee was pretty productive, and I know friend of the show, Matt Davidow, has a very high opinion of McKee, thinks he's a future NFL starter. Second note that I had from the game was Dallas Goedert comes off of IR and plays a lot. You know, seems like the Eagles wanted him to knock off some rust before the playoffs. And Goddard was pretty impressive here. 4 catches, 55 yards on 6 targets. He ran just 9 routes. So 4.55-0 on just 9 routes. So that's a good sign for Goddard heading into this weekend. Evan, any thoughts on McKee long-term and Goddard's return?
Well, Jalen Hurts, and I think that he's going to be cleared, but as of Monday, he was not yet cleared. And I think that if the Eagles were to decide, and assuming that Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee are obviously both healthy, I think you got to go with Tanner McKee at this point. He's just shown a lot more. We've seen enough of Kenny Pickett at this point. Tanner McKee, Ross Tucker was also really high on Tanner McKee having a big game, having a nice game here. Derek Klassen of The Athletic. So, I mean, he's got some support from and Davidow. He's got some support from some savvy individuals. He's just, he's 6'6" and he can't move, but he will stand in the pocket and he will deliver accurately and on time. And clearly he had a really nice grasp of the offense. He was out there playing against Giant starters, but surrounded by backups and performed really, really well. And he was nice off the bench in the previous game. So I think that if Jalen Hurts is not cleared, which I hope and I totally expect him to be, I think you go with Tanner McKee and not Kenny Pickett.
Okay, so Eagles will open the playoffs with a home game against the Green Bay Packers. Remember, these 2 teams met in week 1. That was when the Packers seemed like they were actually trying to throw the football. Eagles won 34-29. I agree with Evan. I would be shocked if Jalen Hurts did not get cleared by his concussion here, meaning they'll have Hurts, Saquon, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, the offensive line, all healthy. And in these playoff games, you could see Saquon get 100% of the running back touches here. And that's obviously incredibly, incredibly valuable. Evan, any thoughts on Eagles setup here against the Packers in round 1?
I mean, I'll have more in my matchups column this week because there are a lot of moving parts on the Packers side. But I'm with you. I mean, look, the Eagles, I expressed my sort of disdain for them not playing Saquon Barkley in this to try to get him to break Eric Dickerson's record. They better win the Super Bowl then, because you don't want to come out empty-handed. You didn't get the all-time NFL rushing leader, and you didn't get the Super Bowl. They better go win the Super Bowl.
Their path is pretty clean, right? I mean, they're a 4.5, 5-point favorite here against the Packers at home. And then if the Bucks beat the Commanders, that's a really clean path because you would get to face Packers and then Bucks. That seems pretty nice to me. Now, if the Commanders end up beating the Bucks, which I think is live, Eagles will then likely play the 5 seed, which is, of course, the Vikings. But yeah, there's certainly a clean path here for the Eagles to make the Super Bowl, and I think they're very, very live to do so. Number 3 seed in the NFC will be the Tampa Bay Bucks. So week 18 was a must-win game for the Bucks. I thought they would absolutely roll this corpse of a Saints team. They didn't. I mean, Saints were up 16-6 at half, and I was like, oh my God, the Bucs are blowing this. Saints had a fourth quarter lead. They do come back and win to not only make the playoffs, but then they pass the Rams to earn the 3 seed. And so now the Bucs will get to open up at home against the Commanders. Evan, what did you think of Bucs comeback win to secure their playoff spot over the Saints on Sunday?
Well, they have a lot of explosive players, and Jalen McMillan has clearly established himself as one of those. I was thinking, so 3 University of Washington receivers got drafted this past year, all in the top 3 rounds. Rome Odunze was a top 10 pick. Jalen Polk was an early second of the Patriots. He's done nothing. Rome Odunze has been very up and down. He's flashed, but very up and down. Jalen McMillan has had the best. He was drafted 3rd among those receivers. He has had the best rookie season of all those University of Washington receivers. Now, he got some benefit from Chris Godwin going down. That cleared an opportunity, but he has capitalized on that. I think he's finished with 8 regular season touchdowns. He's become like a legitimate weapon to the point where they have, Baker's been balling. Baker, by the way, had some sick runs in this game. He finished with 9 for 68 rushing. Bucky Irving, I mean, incredible rookie year. Mike Evans is Mike Evans, and then Jalen McMillan. I mean, they have 4 legit explosive playmakers in their offense. Their defense has issues. You can really hurt them in the passing game. That's been the case all year. Spencer Rattler, actually, he started this game like 21 of 26 or something like that. He was really efficient. You can throw the ball on the Buccaneers. This game, Commanders, Buccaneers, I think it should have a really high total. I have not looked at the totals yet.
Oh, do you want to guess what it might be?
Oh, baby. 53.5.
Okay. Not as accurate as last time. Still a good guess. 50.5 is the total for Commanders.
Well, it's going to go up then. Clearly.
Evan's going to bet it, and it's going to go. It's going to go up. Okay, yeah. I agree on Jalen McMillan. I'll say this. The target share for Jalen McMillan has not been as it appears, right? He has not seen as many targets as people think. But that's because his catch rate and his touchdown rate has been wild. Over his last 5 games, Jalen McMillan has a 77% catch rate and scored 7 touchdowns on 24 catches. That's obviously unsustainable. There's going to be regression on both catch rate and TD rate there. However, he's clearly a baller, and Baker's playing out of his mind. The other thing on Bucky Irving, there were some quotes after the game like, yeah, we got to get Rachaad White more involved. They say that stuff. They don't mean it. It was a must-win game. Bucky Irving got 48 snaps and 21 touches. Rachaad White, 18 snaps and 0 touches. Sean Tucker, 5 snaps, 2 touches. When you watch Bucky play, his ability to change direction really quickly, and I'm no tape bro, but it's striking, man. I mean, he can really make guys miss in kind of short area stuff. It's really, really impressive. Excited about him.
For a guy that is sub 200 pounds to be breaking tackles at the rate he is, it's so impressive. 70% of the snaps, as you mentioned, in this game. He didn't do much in the passing game at all, but he's had some really nice receiving games. People thought that he would be like a 3rd down back in the NFL because of his size and because of his receiving capability. He's obviously well outperformed those expectations.
We haven't even talked about the alleged biggest story of this game, which I'm already sick of talking about, but it's the Mike Evans stuff. He gets there on the incentives. He goes 9-89-0 on 14 targets to get his $3 million. Could have had a bigger game. Baker overthrew him down the right sideline for what should have been a really big game here. But the controversy, Evan, was that they brought Evans back in to get a screen so he could get over 1,000 yards and get his $3 million. Team goes nuts. There's some haters out there, Evan, who did not like this move by the Bucs. Do you have a take on what the Bucs did at the end of the game there?
Well, the haters and the losers, there are many. So there's nothing we could do about it. He's got the 1,000 yards for the 11th straight season to break Jerry Rice's record. We all know that he's not even in the same tier as Jerry Rice, but I do think he's a Hall of Famer, and I think that this helps solidify that.
For sure. Last note on the Bucs for me, Cade Otton was out again for this game. So we saw Payne Durham run 22 routes. Devin Culp ran 14 routes. They did list Cade Otton doubtful for a lot of the week. So maybe there's some chance that he's back for this game against the Commanders. We'll be following that for playoff DFS and playoff best ball stuff. Number 4 seed in the NFC will be the Los Angeles Rams. So Rams made the decision to rest all their starters in week 18. And I know this is Sean McVay's thing. He never plays his starters in the preseason. He always rests his guys in week 18 unless there's something very big to play for. I personally thought it was worth playing starters and trying to win the game in week 18 to earn the number 3 seed and avoid a round 1 matchup with the winner of Minnesota and Detroit. McVay and the Rams disagreed. They went with Jimmy Garoppolo and the backups. They lose to the Seahawks, and now the Rams have to play the Vikings this weekend, which is obviously a much more difficult matchup than it would have been. Evan, what do you think of the decision to rest starters, and any early thoughts on Vikings at Rams?
Well, Blake Corum broke his arm in this game. And so that to me is just going to encourage Sean McVay going forward to not come off of that philosophy. I mean, I think it was expected that the Rams were going to sit starters. They gave, Jimmy Garoppolo moved the offense all day long. And Ronnie Rivers, he's going to be their number 2 running back for as long as they last in the playoffs. Jordan Whittington had some nice manufactured touches. And then Tyler Higbee, to me, was the story of this. And Sean McVay was talking after the game because Tyler Higbee finished with 5 for 46 and a touchdown on 7 targets. And Sean McVay was talking after the game how Tyler Higbee brings a certain energy and swag to the tight end position that the other tight ends that they have, they just don't, they don't bring that like he does. And so my guess is that he is going to be the clear number 1 tight end. They got the Vikings in the first round.
Yeah, that was my note here as well. Remember, Higbee was coming back from this ACL, finally made his debut on the season in week 16, started ramped up to 27 routes in week 18, did Tyler Higbee, 546-1 on 7 targets from Jimmy G. Clearly, a healthy Tyler Higbee is an upgrade on Colby Parkinson and Davis Allen. So I agree with Evan. He will be the featured tight end here in the playoffs. Last note I had on the Rams was for Dynasty Bros. You saw Jordan Whittington get a chance here and had a pretty good game, made a big play. Cooper Kupp will be 32 years old in June. There were some concerning signs, I thought, down the stretch for Cooper Kupp in terms of earning targets, getting open, etc. And so, yeah, I think Jordan Whittington should at least be on the radar for Dynasty Bros. Number 5 seed in the NFC, which is the Minnesota Vikings. So massive spot, massive game, as we talked about on Sunday Night Football. Sam Darnold plays maybe his worst game of the year. I mean, so many overthrows, missed Justin Jefferson in the end zone multiple times, was terrible in the red zone. Sam Darnold completed 43% of his passes. That's the lowest of the season against the Lions defense, which had obviously really been struggling. So I know we already talked about this a little bit, Evan, but how concerned were you with the Darnold faceplant here, and anything else for you on the Vikings?
Yeah, I expected him to play a lot better. He really had a nice season. I don't think that this tarnishes the season like completely, but it's a big black mark at the end of the year in such a big game. He missing guys high relentlessly, never got it together either. It wasn't like, oh, he shakes it off and he moves forward and he has a big second half and they threaten against the Lions. Like, he just never got it together. In fairness, he was under pressure at well over half of his dropbacks. I don't think any of his teammates played particularly well. The Vikings just, in general, the defense played pretty well, I think, for most of the game. I know that the score at the end suggests otherwise because they just could not stop Jahmyr Gibbs in the second half. But the Vikings were just completely off kilter from the jump. They had some nice runs early in the game from Cam Akers and Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones got banged up, and then when the score got out of hand, they couldn't lean on that anymore. So their entire and the Lions have been getting killed by running backs for like an extended period because of all their losses in the defensive front seven. So when that went away because they fell behind so much, they couldn't use that to their advantage. It just all out domination. It was. The score was a little bit more lopsided than the actual game was. At half, it was 10-6.
Yeah.
But it wound up being a dominant effort. The Vikings got dominated.
Yeah, this Aaron Jones stuff. He feels like he's been banged up for years now, right? Like, he went into the locker room at one point in this game on Sunday night, comes back out and looks fine. The quote after the game was, Aaron Jones got a little sore with what he's been dealing with, but he was able to play through it. He'll be fine. So, they could have used the bye, I think. They don't get it. Now they have to play on Wildcard Weekend at the Rams. They're only 1.5-point favorite here at the Rams. I do think they need to get Addison and Hawkinson going. I mean, Addison and Hawkinson combined to see 14 targets in this game on Sunday night. That resulted in 3 catches for 9 yards. So they got to get those guys going and get some attention off of Justin Jefferson. These two teams played in October, the Vikings and the Rams. Rams won 30-20 in a game the Vikings were only able to run 50 plays. Sam Darnold only got 25 passes off. So, yeah, it's a really interesting game.
It was one of the weirdest games of the season. It was a Thursday nighter. There were trade rumors involving Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and no one knew whether or not Puka Nacua was going to play, and he wound up playing and going 7 for 106. That was his first game back from IR. Really, really weird game.
Let's go to the 6th seed in the NFC. It is the Washington football team, a.k.a. the Commanders. This was a weird one for the Commanders in Week 18. They said all week they were going to go all out to win. They wanted the 6th seed to avoid a round 1 game at Philadelphia. And they did that. They squeezed out a win over the Cowboys. Now they get to play at Tampa, a very winnable game for them. But it was weird because they did play all the starters, except they pulled Jaden Daniels around halftime. We thought they were going to go all the way with Jaden Daniels in this game. They said he had some mild soreness in his leg, and they made the decision to say, hey, let's just go with Marcus Mariota. They now say that Jaden Daniels' leg is fine. It's just a weird thing all around. We're not going to have any docs on Jaden Daniels, I don't think. It sounds like it's perfectly fine, but it was still a weird run out. Evan, any thoughts on Commanders game in Week 18 against the Cowboys?
Well, I think that Dan Quinn kind of panicked because Jaden Daniels was getting smacked around early, particularly by Micah Parsons. I mean, Jaden Daniels took 4 sacks on 16 dropbacks to open the game. I think that Dan Quinn just felt like, all right, we got to pull him because he's getting rocked, and their protection has been up and down all season.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty scary to have to pull him there. I will say they're getting some guys back. Austin Eckler returned here for 35 snaps. Brian Robinson continues to struggle a bit. De'Ami Brown also returned. And I think that stuff is notable, the pass game stuff, Eckler, De'Ami, Ertz, McLaurin, Zacchaeus, because the Bucs just are so bad in coverage, and the Bucs have lost so many guys in their secondary. So pretty interesting spot for all those guys. But yeah, really, really interesting game. Highest total of Wild Card Weekend, as Evan alluded to, 50.5 in Bucs and Commanders. 7th seed in the NFC will be the Green Bay Packers. So, as expected, the Packers tried to middle it in Week 18. They kind of wanted to get the 6th seed, but they could only get there if the Commanders lost. So we saw Jordan Love start. We saw him leave the game. Then it looked like he was warming back up when it looked like the Commanders could lose. In the end, Commanders win. Packers are the 7th seed. They will play at Philadelphia this weekend. It was an expensive Week 18 for the Packers because Christian Watson sustained a torn ACL. Just a brutal injury for a guy who seemingly has worked so hard to overcome hamstring injuries and realize his talent, but torn ACL is just going to add to the I guess narrative that Christian Watson simply cannot stay healthy. Evan, what do you think of Packers in Week 18?
Yeah, that was the big story. I mean, the other big story was that Jordan Love sustained, it was a hand injury. He said that he lost feeling in his throwing hand, but the Packers are saying that he should be fine. And they probably just pulled him out generally as a precaution, although he did not. I mean, he wasn't really doing anything positive before he went out. With Christian Watson, he's such a unique player, respective to the rest of their receiver core. Obviously, they have talent. They got Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, I think, will probably jump right in for Christian Watson as he has done historically. But Christian Watson is so different from those other guys that I think you lose a dimension of your offense when you lose Christian Watson, and he probably won't be ready for Week 1 next season.
Yeah, and a difficult matchup here, obviously, at Philadelphia in Week 1. I do expect Romeo Doubs back here. Doubs did not play in Week 18 because he was sick, so I think it'll be Wicks and Doubs on the outside, Jaden Reed in the slot. Remember way back in Week 1, Jaden Reed went nuts on the Eagles, 4 catches, 138 yards, and 1 touchdown on 6 targets. That was so long ago, man. It's hard for me to have any takeaways from that Week 1 game that the Packers and the Eagles played up to now. Eagles defense has gotten so much better. Packers play calling has been mind-numbing since then. So I don't think that game matters too much. But yeah, Evan, any more thoughts on Packers-Eagles matchup before we move on?
Yeah, I'm not going to probably take away almost anything from that Week 1 game because, as you, I mean, was Cooper DeJean even playing at that
Yeah.
time? The Eagles, I don't think he was.
Yeah.
The Eagles, and Quinyon Mitchell, wasn't nearly the force early then that he is now. The Eagles' defense has come so far, and that's a staple of Vic Fangio defenses. They tend to improve as the season progresses.
All right. Let's go to the AFC now. Number 1 seed in the AFC will, of course, be the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs rested all starters here in Week 18 as expected. They also have a bye. And we talked about this a little bit last week, Evan, but that means Patrick Mahomes last played on Wednesday, December 25th, the Christmas game. Then they're off Week 18, off wild card, won't play again until January 18th or 19th. So almost a full month off for Patrick Mahomes and the starters here. I know people are going to say, oh, but what about the rust? I mean, I think Andy Reid's track record in these spots, plus them getting the team healthy, means more than any rust concerns. And it's kind of a new team. I mean, Mahomes, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, all healthy and together finally. That's pretty nice. So, Evan, what do you think? Any thoughts here on Chiefs as they get set for yet another bye week?
It is pretty nice. And I think that the Chiefs were really hitting their offensive stride over their final few regular season games, obviously with the exception of this stupid game that occurred against Denver. But I think that that's the best offense that they've played all season. They look like a team that was, during those games, they looked like a team that was going to three-peat. I will say that, the narrative for, and don't quote me on this, I'm no college football analyst at all, but the narrative for the college football playoff has been that like the teams that got byes, they didn't win, they've been losing, and it's because of rust. And all the teams that have kept playing, throughout, like they're the teams that have made the Final Four. It's totally different, I think, with the Chiefs. I mean, this is a long time off. Like, let's, we're being real here. But this is Andy Reid with the history of coming off byes. I think that they're going to be good to go.
I mean, I also wouldn't take anything away from the college football playoff byes. Penn State was a freaking 13-point favorite or whatever against Boise. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? Bye week or not? Shout out Penn State. But anyways.
By the way, Notre Dame favored by 2.5.
I know that line keeps moving. Is that your fault? It opened 1. It opened 1, and now it's out to 2.5. I was like, what is going on here? By the way, Chiefs are like the second choice to win the Super Bowl now in the betting markets. Chiefs are plus 370 to win the Super Bowl, behind only the Lions, who are around plus 320. I know I made the pick like a month or two ago. I went with Lions over Bills on this show. I kind of want to change it to Lions over Ravens, but I'm going to stick with what I had. I'm going to stick with Lions over Bills. Evan, do you have a Super Bowl matchup and prediction for the people yet?
Yeah, because when I did the Bills team preview way back in June or whatever it was, I bet on the Bills to win it all. I bet on Josh Allen to win MVP. So I'm going with the Bills. I don't know. I'll by the end of the show, I'll decide on who I am picking from the NFC.
Okay. Speaking of the Bills, number 2 seed will be those Buffalo Bills. They also rested starters for the most part here in Week 18. They did allow James Cook to get to 1,000 yards for the season. James Cook also scored his 16th rushing touchdown of the season, tying O.J. Simpson's franchise record. One bet that I did make, Evan, that might pique your interest if you like Bills. James Cook, 180-1 to be the Super Bowl MVP on FanDuel. Now, I want to be clear for people who are betting Super Bowl MVP. It is really likely to be the quarterback, like overwhelming percent of the time, 80, 90%, something like that. But in outcomes where the Bills win and James Cook scores one of these games where he has like 3 long touchdown runs, 181 sounded pretty decent to me, but, what do I know?
Absolutely. I love it.
They were also really thin at wide receiver in this game. So Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel played a ton with Mitch Trubisky here, but doesn't really matter too much. Anyways, they'll open with a home game against the Broncos. Evan, any thoughts on Bills heading into that one?
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit worried about this game. We'll talk about it more when we get to Denver. But one note that I had is that Amari Cooper, as of Monday, dealing with a personal issue, and
Yeah.
Sean McDermott would not commit to him playing against Denver.
Yeah. I know. And he hasn't been a big factor. I mean,
No.
these midseason wide receiver trades are tough to execute and win on, and they certainly
Yeah.
doesn't look like they've won on the Amari Cooper one regardless. But it was good to see Curtis Samuel out there and playing well. Same with Keon Coleman. Oh, we need your final MVP vote here, Evan. It is Josh Allen is now minus 470 roughly. Lamar is plus 350 or so. Those are really the only two candidates. If you had a vote, would you go Josh Allen or Lamar?
Yeah, I would go with Josh Allen.
Okay.
I mean, and again, I have bias there, but I think it's Josh Allen's year. And Lamar had an incredible year. He had a better year than he did last year when he won the MVP.
Not even close. Way better.
He's absolutely deserving of the MVP, but I think it's Josh Allen's year.
From any statistical standpoint, Lamar Jackson has been better. Like almost every stat, Lamar Jackson has been better than Josh Allen. It's like if you watch the games, there's like some Superman aura around Josh Allen where he's like carrying this team to victories. And you could say the same thing about Lamar Jackson. I think they're both really, really, really deserving. And again, I would say Lamar has played like levels better than he played last year. I mean, when he won the MVP. Speaking of Lamar, let's go to the 3 seed in the AFC, which is the Baltimore Ravens. This was not a fair fight on Saturday. I mean, it was Bailey Zappi and a bunch of Browns dust against a red-hot Ravens team. They roll 35-10. Second half, Derrick Henry does second half Derrick Henry things. 138 yards and 2 touchdowns on 20 carries. The big news, though, was the Zay Flowers injury. Hurts his knee in this game. They're calling him day-to-day. Ravens are refusing to give any details about Zay Flowers beyond that. I think we're going to start with Zay Flowers out for this week in projection, but we're really just guessing at this point. Evan, any thoughts on the Ravens game Saturday night and the Zay Flowers situation?
Well, I will say that I'm glad to see Todd Monken finally receiving some head coaching attention. The Bears, actually, who I think that's the perfect match. The Bears are going to interview him, and I think a couple other teams might as well. But that's besides the point. The Zay Flowers injury looked horrible at the time that it occurred, but after the game, I think the Ravens kind of sounded optimistic.
Yeah.
But maybe not optimistic enough for him to be available here. If he's not available against Pittsburgh, Rashad Bateman has had a really, really nice season. Rashad Bateman, I saw, was top 10 in ESPN's open score, and that's the kind of player on the season, and that's the kind of player that he was supposed to be when he was coming out of college, like a technician as a route runner, be a little bit like Keenan Allen, and he's really delivered. They're going to need him to deliver in Isaiah Likely as well if they don't have Zay Flowers against Pittsburgh. I'm still hopeful that they will have Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers had a great year, man. He went to the Pro Bowl. He really took a step forward, I thought, from a pretty promising rookie season.
Yeah.
And he's an invaluable part of their offense.
I love Zay Flowers, man. I mean, like such a joystick out there with the ball in his hands. And I think it's a big loss for them if he is not out there. But yeah, they have Bateman. They have Isaiah Likely. And Mark Andrews has now had a touchdown in 6 straight games. I mean, Mark Andrews is really playing well. And people are going to say, and we'll start talking about next year way too soon, but people are going to say that the reason Mark Andrews struggled so much at the beginning of the year is the car crash. He wasn't himself, et cetera, et cetera. End of the year, Mark Andrews has been absolutely balling here into the playoffs. One other note that I think is important around the Zay Flowers stuff, Nelson Aguilar was coming off a concussion, but he was full practice, not on final injury report, but was inactive for this game. My take was that they were just protecting him. They were a 20-point favorite against the Browns. No reason to put Nelson Aguilar out there. Other people have said, well, maybe Tylan Wallace is just ahead of Nelson Aguilar. Tylan Wallace gives them more on special teams. I'm still skeptical about that. I'd still bet on Aguilar being ahead, but I just wanted to note that for anyone out there in the deep playoff best ball stuff. Let's go to the 4 seed in the AFC will be the Houston Texans. As expected, Texans play the starters for a little bit here in an effort to right the ship on offense. And they did it. Stroud goes 6 of 6 for 50 yards and a touchdown to Nico Collins. By the way, Nico Collins ran 8 routes, saw 5 targets, and scored a touchdown. But yeah, so they pulled Stroud after that. Texans will host the Chargers Saturday as a 3-point home underdog. So, people do not have a lot of optimism about the Texans right now whatsoever. Evan, any thoughts on Stroud's short time in there, and any other Texans thoughts?
No big takeaways for me from this Week 18 game against the Titans. I still think that Bobby Slowick, the Texans offensive coordinator, probably going to be fired at some point. I do think that the Chargers and the Texans are fairly evenly matched, but obviously, the line makers don't.
Yeah.
I mean, the line makers think that the Chargers are like almost a touchdown better if we're going to adjust for home field.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I know. Exactly. And like, yeah, we'll get to the Chargers in a second. They're playing really, really well right now. The problem for the Texans is like they always offensive line problems. No Steph Diggs, no Tank Dell. They're out there with Nico Collins, who's incredible, but then Dalton Schultz, Robert Woods, John Mechie. Like,
Yeah.
it's tough, man. It's tough. And so, yeah, Chargers 3-point favorite on the road.
It feels like an under kind of game.
Let's go to the 5 seed in the AFC will be the Los Angeles Chargers. So after the Steelers lost to the Bengals on Saturday night, Chargers knew that they could earn the 5 seed with a win over the Raiders. We suspected that would be important to them as they'd avoid playing at Baltimore in another Harbaugh Bowl. They probably would have been like a 7-point dog or something at Baltimore. Instead, Chargers win this game against the Raiders and earn the right to go to Houston as a 3-point favorite. And they'll come in hot, man. I mean, Justin Herbert absolutely shredded again here. And my God, Evan, I didn't think this was possible after last year. Quentin Johnston, 13 catches, 186 yards for Quentin Johnston. So any thoughts on Chargers game against the Raiders as they get set to open their playoff run against the Texans?
Justin Herbert running with the football has become a thing again. And that's really nice because there was a time period there where he was dealing with all kinds of ankle, knee stuff, obviously the plantar fasciitis, and he stopped running, but he's back to running. He had a 41-yard run in this game. Quentin Johnston finished his regular season, and he missed a couple games, with 55 catches for 711 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's a pretty nice second NFL season statistically, and is going to put him back in buckets, like if we're looking at it analytically, where he, is on an upward trend. I mean, obviously he's big and he's fast. We know that. And they really showed a lot of faith in him throughout the season. And I mean, he delivered. He had a monster game here. Lad McConkey continues to look really good. J.K. Dobbins finished with 21 touches. So they're feeling him back in that workhorse role. They signed Ezekiel Elliott to their practice squad. I'm assuming that he's maybe, he's like Gus Edwards 2.0, basically.
Yeah.
So if they need him, but it's going to be the J.K. Dobbins show against Houston.
Well, yeah. And on J.K. Dobbins, like this was far from a must win for the Chargers. I thought maybe they would like try to take it easy on J.K. Dobbins a little bit, considering all his knee issues. They rolled J.K. Dobbins out for 21 touches here. I mean, they just do not care. And so you're going to see a ton of J.K. Dobbins here in the playoffs. Last thing on Quentin Johnston, it's like I really try not to make these like talent takes on young players because we just don't know. The sample size is so small and we have to leave room for guys to get better by any metric, by anything, by tape, anything. Quentin Johnston had like the worst rookie year you could possibly have for a first round wide receiver, but guys are allowed to get better. And we should probably say the same thing about Bryce Young. I mean, we're not going to talk about the Panthers on this show, but Bryce Young over the last month has kind of solidified himself. And now the Panthers are like, oh yeah, we had to bench him for Andy Dalton, but now we have our franchise quarterback. Like it's crazy how fast things can turn when you're in the talent take business.
Since week 8 or since like somewhere around mid-season, Bryce Young has been like a top 6 or top 5 quarterback in PFF's ratings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, guys can definitely, even coaches will tell you like from year 1 to year 2, that's when players make the biggest leap.
Let's go to the 6th seed in the AFC. It will be the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Steelers back their way into the playoffs, right? And they tried to win on Saturday night against the Bengals. They played their starters, but they lost their 4th straight game. Now, I don't think this is a normal 4-game losing streak because the schedule was absurd. At Eagles, at Ravens, versus Chiefs in an 11-day stretch. And then this game on Saturday night against the Bengals team that to me is clearly one of the best 8 teams in the NFL, even though they didn't make the playoffs. So, it's not a normal 4-game losing streak, but I still have concerns that these Steelers just aren't good enough to really compete for a Super Bowl here. They will open as 10-point dogs in Baltimore this weekend. Evan, any thoughts on Steelers game Saturday night and their playoff outlook?
No real big thoughts. It just feels like they really caught some momentum there for a minute about a month ago, and people were saying, and I saw like Bill Simmons, people are crushing Bill Simmons for saying that they were the best team in the AFC like 5 weeks ago or something like that. They have a really big problem though with George Pickens, because George Pickens was not in tune in this game. We've seen the on-off splits with George Pickens. I mean, they need him out there performing, and his head was not in this game against Cincinnati. That's their biggest concern right now. That's Pittsburgh's biggest concern right now, is getting their number one receiver's head back on his shoulders, because they need him if they're going to have any chance of competing against Baltimore. They did beat Baltimore. It was like 18-16 sort of game in like week 10 or something like that. So they have that one notch on their belt. But, I mean, they're not going to be able to challenge the Ravens without George Pickens having a big game.
Yeah, I mean, he lives his life on tilt. I mean, he looks like me on a Sunday. He's just always on tilt. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But, yeah, George Pickens had one catch on 6 targets here against a pretty weak Bengals defense. Now,
and there were a bunch of, like, videos and pictures of, like, teammates, like, grabbing him by the helmet, like, get your head in the game, coaches yelling at him. I mean – I don't know what his deal is, but I mean, this was like the reason that he was not a first round pick in the draft. Why he fell like kind of deep in the second round was because people were worried about this kind of stuff.
I'd love to see more Big Mike Williams. Big Mike Williams only ran 13 routes in this game, while Calvin Austin ran 31 and Van Jefferson ran 24. I'd love to see more Big Mike Williams. I mean, right now, their primary target has been Pat Freiermuth. Shout out Penn State. I mean, it's crazy. So they have weapons problems. And even TJ Watt, he's major disruptor. There's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork now saying TJ Watt is not as good as it seems. His pressure rate isn't that good. I know if you look at Brandon Thorne's stuff, TJ Watt's pressure rate is not at the same level as a lot of these other elite pass rushers, but he certainly makes splash plays. But yeah, I mean, I'd be shocked if they won in Baltimore. Obviously, market agrees as they are 10-point dogs. 7th and final seed in the AFC is the hometown Denver Broncos. Yes, lifelong Broncos fan since about 3 weeks ago for me. Broncos needed to win and in for the Broncos, and they do it against the Chiefs junior varsity team. It was like a celebration the whole game. They win 38-0. Bo Nix goes completely nuts for one of his best games of the season. The Chiefs got off 33 plays, and I understand it was Carson Wentz and all the backups, but they ran 33 plays. That's like almost impossible. Pat Surtain is now the mega chalk to be the defensive player of the year. The vibes around the Broncos, Evan, they are strong. Any thoughts on their performance here against the Chiefs and their setup against the Bills this week?
Yeah, I don't really care what happened, against the Chiefs, but there's no question that the Broncos go into the playoffs with momentum. They're scary for me as a Bills backer, as a lifelong Bills supporter since the beginning of the season. I think Denver is scary. I mean, they have one of the best defense in the league. As you mentioned, they had the defensive player of the year. Their offense can be, Marvin Mims and Cortland Sutton are like perfect complementary receivers to each other. And they've really started to lean into Marvin Mims as a guy in the screen game. He's made catches. He's made contested catches. He looks great, man. He is really hitting his stride right now. Cortland Sutton has had a really nice season overall. That's a really nice 1-2 punch at wideout. The running game is still kind of, you never know what you're going to get. But Bo Nix has gone back to running a little bit. I think they're dangerous.
So do I. On the Marvin Mims stuff, production's been awesome. Role hasn't changed. For some reason, Sean Payton just does not want the role to change. In this game, Marvin Mims 15 routes on 33 Bo Nix dropbacks. In week 17, Marvin Mims only 18 routes on 39 Bo Nix dropbacks. But to Evan's point, they are force feeding him the ball way more now when he does run routes. And even back to last year, I mean, anytime Sean Payton gave Marvin Mims a chance, whether it was special teams or offense, he made huge plays. I just don't know why he does not play more. The running back situation, they're using Jaleel McLaughlin as like a base back a ton, which I did not see coming at all. Javonte Williams has settled in as like a pass pro kind of back, and Estime is playing also. So it's going to be a tough one to decipher. None will project well at Buffalo just because they're splitting it 3 ways. But yeah, And the Bo Nix stuff, I mean, he finished the fantasy season 9th among quarterbacks in points per game, 7th in fantasy points overall. And a lot of that was by running. I mean, 430 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns for Bo Nix. And he completed a ton of passes as a rookie. Like, Bo Nix is a major fantasy asset. He runs, he completes passes. He's a major fantasy asset for people who have him out there in Dynasty. All right. That is going to do it for our preview, team by team preview of the 2024-2025 NFL playoffs. Excited for the games this week. If you're in the playoff best ball stuff, be sure to check out our rankings and strategy for that. We'll also have rankings up for the regular fantasy stuff for anyone who has draft kit or in season. That means FFPC and FFC. And if you're in just like a playoff fantasy league with your boys, we'll have rankings up for that also by Tuesday night.
I got to give my Super Bowl prediction.
Oh, yes, yes.
I'm going to have to go Bills-Eagles, because if the Eagles don't make it to the Super Bowl, then they really blew it. I mean, they screwed it up really bad. Sirianni, I can't believe that he's making these decisions, but Bills-Eagles.
Okay, so you say Bills.
And Bills win it.
Bills over Eagles for Evan. I'm going to stick with what I said before, even though I'm scared now. I'm going to stick with Lions over Bills for Evan. Producer Luke. Producer Ryan, the richest man I know. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.